some of the other laureates, Jackie Joyner Kersee.
Oh yes, uh-huh.
Isn't
she
she a
endorsed
sweetheart?
my book. Uh-huh.
She's so
She's
nice.
terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen her, maybe it's been 6 years.
That'd be about
2006 or was it 2008? I think it's 2006 the last time I saw her.
Well, she was, 2003 or 2004, one of the laureates in there. And it was funny, we were comparing asthma medications. But she was just wonderful.
Yeah. During the 1992 Olympic trials in New Orleans, the Olympic Games used to have 2 wheelchair exhibition events, one 1,500 meter event for men and an 800 meter event for women. Mm-hmm. And so and it was only a final, so we had to do our prelims, semis, everything. And then at the Olympic event, it was the final. And so we were at the U.S. Olympic trials, and it also doubled as the exhibition event trials. So I'm going around the track, and on the infield, I hear somebody scream at the top of their lungs, and I had no idea who it was. And so then later on, after the race, I went back to the tent, the warm-up tent, the cool-down tent, and Jackie was stretching. She said, "Did you hear me yelling for you?" I was like, "That was you! Oh, that's so cool!" Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she is, and what she does for kids in her area is just great.
Yeah, she's got a good heart.
Well, let's get started. You ready to roll, sir?
We are, sir.
Okay. As I say, this is kind of like biographical, so we'll start at the beginning.
Okay.
I understand you're from Milwaukee.
I am from Milwaukee, yes.
Beautiful city.
I just got back from vacation in the North Woods of Wisconsin. It was wonderful.
Well, tell me about childhood there in Milwaukee. What was your family like? What kind of environment did you grow up in?
I grew up on the north side of Milwaukee. I'm one of 5 children. I was the second oldest, but always the shortest, unfortunately. My parents raised me the same way they raised my brothers and my sister. The fact that I had spina bifida was a characteristic, like hair color, eye color. It wasn't a defining principle. And so I had to help with dishes, and I had to clean my room, and my Saturday job was to clean the living room and vacuum and dust. And so it was a very normal childhood. I remember going swimming at the local park. There were frustrations because of spina bifida. My legs were weak, and so I couldn't run around with the other kids. But you figure out ways to fit in and do your own thing. So I would be the timer for all the running races, and then I would challenge everybody to crawling races afterward. And because I don't have normal sensation in my knees, I usually won those. I didn't feel the sticks and the dirt balls under my knees. But it was a fun, active childhood.
So your parents basically said, no limits. It's up to you. Decide what you want to do.
They just said, you are going to be held responsible just like your brothers and sister. And there was always a fire inside, because outside the family, oftentimes people would feel sorry for me and be very patronizing, and that used to be very frustrating. I didn't understand that. And so it fed a fire inside that as I got older, it built this prove you wrong attitude. I wanted to prove people wrong, that I could do things and that I could be as successful as anybody else.
When did you get interested in competitive sports? Was that in high school?
Well, I was always interested in sports. I tried to be on the softball team in grade school. I could hit the ball, but I couldn't run the bases. And so I was a manager for the girls basketball team and the girls volleyball team and softball. I had always wanted to get in there and get dirty, but I was the manager. And then when I was a freshman in high school, I had a bike accident. I was coming home from a babysitting job. I took a corner too sharply and fell on my hip, and because of the spina bifida, I always had very weak lower body musculature, and so my hip dislocated when I fell on it. And so I ended up having a series of 5 major hip operations over a year. I was in a body cast that went from just below my chest all the way down, and when I wasn't laying in a hospital bed in the hospital, we had rented a hospital bed in the middle of our living room. We had to sell the piano so that the hospital bed could fit there. And After a year of surgeries, nothing worked. I got the last body cast off, sat up in bed, and it dislocated again. So I developed a need to walk with crutches and begin using a wheelchair. And I transferred high schools for my junior and senior years. And during the first couple of weeks that I was at this new school, there was another kid who also used a wheelchair, also had spina bifida, said, "Hey, Gene, why don't you come try wheelchair soccer?" And I was like, "Wheelchair soccer? How do you play wheelchair soccer? You need your legs." And he's like, "It's this really cool adapted sport." And I thought, that is not real sport. Adapted sport is hokey. I am not going to go hang out with those wheelchair people. They're weird. So I kept putting this guy off the entire school year. And finally, in May of my junior year, I thought the only way I'm going to get this guy off my back is to go to this practice, and I'm going to go to one, and then I'll be done. And it was nothing like I thought it was going to be. Chairs are crashing and banging, bodies are flying. I thought, this is sport. And from there, I played wheelchair football, wheelchair ice hockey, tennis, basketball, even square danced.
University of Illinois recruited you to do what, basketball?
University of Illinois recruited me to play wheelchair basketball. It took several letters and several phone calls because Wisconsin and Illinois do not like each other. And for most people who don't live in the state, they only identify with Chicago. Our DJs would have verbal warfare against their DJ. There was no way I was going to Illinois. But the fact that the coach, Brad Hedrick, wanted me on his team, he wanted me on his team, that meant the world to me. I had always been the last kid picked at recess for a team, or the last kid picked during physical education classes, and this guy wanted me on his team. I was really honored by that. I decided I was going to come down to Illinois. I was going to finish my college education and hightail it back to Wisconsin, but it never happened. I've been here since 1987, with the exception of 2 years in Indianapolis.
When did you get interested in racing?
When I arrived at the University of Illinois, I not only played wheelchair basketball, but I also got involved in the track and road racing program. I had done some recreational racing prior to coming to Illinois, and so as an undergraduate, I was a dual sport athlete. And just as that kid in high school tried to convince me to do wheelchair sports, my racing coach tried to convince me to do a marathon. Well, who wants to do a 26.2 mile race? I did not. And it took my coach, Marty Morse, my racing coach, Marty, 2 years to talk me into doing this 26.2 mile race. The only reason I did it is because he wouldn't take no for an answer. And again, I thought I'd get him off my back. I'd do one marathon, I'd be finished and move forward in life. I love doing 10Ks, the 6.2 mile races. I even did a half marathon, several half marathons to try to appease him, but he would not let me off the hook. So I did my first Boston Marathon in Chicago, 1989, and ended up qualifying for Boston. Fought tooth and nail. I didn't want to go to Boston. I didn't want to do another marathon. The coach always wins. I went out to Boston in 1990 and ended up winning my first Boston.
What was your time?
1:43.17.
Wow.
I broke the world record by almost 7 minutes.
So,
I didn't think I belonged in the race, but my coach saw something I didn't.
what did you think when you'd done that? Like, wait a minute, this is different.
I was amazed. I was shocked. I was on cloud 9, 10, 11, and 12 for 4 weeks afterward. I just was on this high that is hard to describe.
How do you train for the Boston Marathon using a chair?
You do a lot of miles, just like runners do. We were out on the roads 120 to 150 miles a week. We were doing track training, so interval training on the track, distance training. I had the benefit of being surrounded by not only female teammates but male teammates. In the sport of wheelchair track and road racing, we utilize drafting just like cyclists and car racers, and so if I was able to hang in the draft of the guys, I could get faster and faster. my coach also used to moto pace us with his vehicle. So we would be on the roads, and this vehicle would provide an incredible draft, and he would keep the speeds going up, and you would push as hard as you could to try to stay with him. We also did a lot of weightlifting. We lifted 3 to 4 times a week, and I got stronger than I realized. It seemed to have happened suddenly, but certainly it was a process.
So you won 8 Boston marathons, 5 new course records, 5 world best times. My gosh.
I've won Boston 8 times. I had the world best time on the Boston Marathon course for the women's wheelchair division from 1990 until 2011. It was broken in 2011 by 16 seconds. And certainly I've relived my races and thought about, well, where could I have picked up more time? That competitiveness never goes away.
Well, describe the competition. There were some other tremendous athletes in reading up on your story. You had some really tough competition out there.
Well, there were a lot of great athletes from around the world, but my main rival during those Boston Marathon years was a woman named Louise Savage from Australia. She typically won the road races that were on flat courses, and I typically won the road races that were on hilly courses. But it's all about positioning in the pack and strategy about when you start your final sprint. And so I got the better of Louise most of those years in Boston, but she was right there a few of the years and broke my heart with a couple of those finishes. In 1998, she beat me by 0.2 of a second. In 1999, she beat me by half a second. So finally, in 2000, I came back and got number 8.
Wow! Tell me about the Olympics.
The Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games really are an honor. You train really hard, you go to the trials, you hope that you are fit enough to qualify for those events, and when you do in fact qualify, there's an immense pride that goes with representing your country. Yeah, I still feel the chills of having USA on the front and the back of my uniform. I was so proud to represent the USA. Typically on the last night of competitions after closing ceremonies, all the athletes from around the world trade uniform pieces. I never wanted to trade my uniform pieces because I loved my USA clothing. And I still have most of it. There were a few pieces that I agreed to trade, but there's a thrill when you're out on the track, really in your sport venue. But for me, to be out on the track and to hear the crowd. In 1996, it was an especially incredible experience because the games were in Atlanta. It was on my own home country turf. And so a lot of my family attended the Olympic exhibition event. Others attended the Paralympic Games that were held a couple weeks later. The day of our Olympic event, we raced in the morning, but we received our medals in the evening. There's 2 sessions on the track, a morning and an evening. And so the evening that we received our medals was the evening when Michael Johnson was running in his famous gold shoes. So the stadium was packed. There were 86,000 people. Louise Savage got the gold medal by 23/100ths of a second that year, and I got the silver. So when Louise was introduced, the crowd, clapped and cheered. But when I was announced, there were a lot of Americans there, and a lot of people stood up. There was just this roar I had never experienced, and it made me tearful. The president of the International Olympic Committee awarded our medals that year. In 1992, I also qualified for the Olympic exhibition event, and Connie Hansen, a woman that I beat in my first Boston Marathon in 1990, and I broke her world record. She got the gold medal in 1992, and I got the silver that year. The Queen of Spain presented our medals that year. I have a lot of special memories.
When when athletes start to get noticed and they start to get reputations, they get fans, what kind of fan base did you start to get, and when did people start noticing you and yeah, this is somebody we want to watch and see how she does?
When I won the Boston Marathon in 1990, that was a breakthrough, life-changing event. All of a sudden, overnight, the media wanted to talk to me. People wanted my autographs. I started getting invitations to speak. I had done some speaking prior to that, but all of a sudden, everybody wanted my attention, and I had to learn how to say no, because it's really easy to get caught up in all of that and to go here, there, and everywhere for these events. But I never wanted to miss my training, and my coach didn't want me to miss training either. And so we developed a system that would allow me to accept many of the invitations, but not all of them, while still staying focused.
As all this is happening, how did your professional career develop? You know, as you know, the athletics is one thing, but you have to make a living too.
Well, it's funny because my undergraduate degree from the University of Illinois is in speech communication. I thought I was going to get into public relations, but I thought I was going to be the person behind the scenes. I had always been somewhat shy, and so when I won Boston and then I won it again and then went to the Olympic and the Paralympic Games, there was a major adjustment. But by the same token, the more I spoke, the more comfortable I became, the more refined my thoughts were, the more I realized that I had a platform on which I could educate and motivate and excite people. So I was being paid to give speeches, but I was also earning money winning races. I was a professional athlete. I was a professional athlete until I retired from racing following the Sydney Games in 2000. Along with the speaking and the race winnings, I also had corporate endorsements. So I had money from that as well.
Wow. When did you come back to the University of Illinois to work here? Just curious.
Yeah, well, during all those years that I competed, I remained at the University of Illinois, but I was working as a volunteer coach when I wasn't training. So a lot of the work experience I got during those formative years was volunteer time. After I retired from racing, I did full-time motivational speaking and remained in the Champaign area until 2004, moved to Indianapolis for a couple of years, and then in 2006 there was an opportunity to become an Associate Director of Development in the College of Applied Health Sciences here at the university, and I have a master's degree in the college. So I returned to Illinois in February of 2006. The other interesting part of the College of Applied Health Sciences is not only does it have academic units, but it also has a service unit, and that service unit oversees all of the programs and services for students with disabilities, both physical, sensory, and then also those with learning disabilities or other sorts of cognitive injuries.
Well, you'd be a heck of a catch because you know so much about it and the public speaking skills and everything.
It all came together. You know, you asked the question about how did my professional career develop. It was on the fly as I moved forward in my life. It just seemed like opportunities continued to present themselves. I've been very blessed.
Well, you know, in this place, you know, some would say it sells itself, but it's such a wonderful story, you know, with Tim Nugent starting things back, coming in after the war and seeing what needed to be done. And there's so much innovation here, and you know, I'm just amazed by the place. We have a good rehabilitation center at Carbondale, too.
Sure, that was another school I was considering.
Well, they were closely linked, too, because
Yeah.
Ted Nugent and Guy Renzaglia, who started ours, were very good friends. And they would lecture back and forth. a guy tried to hire Tim.
Tim,
But Tim wanted to stay here. So
Fortunately.
yeah, good for you.
Fortunately
Good
for us.
But it's a terrific place. How do you go out? Tell me about your job now. What you're doing as a development
Well,
officer.
before I get into that,
Yeah.
I have to say, the University of Illinois changed my life, and I still get tearful when I think about it, when I talk about it. There isn't a speech I give when I don't talk about the University of Illinois. When I first moved to the U of I didn't know anything about its history for services regarding students with disabilities. I didn't know about the wounded veterans who came back. I didn't know that Tim had contacted over 300 colleges and universities to establish a program for students with disabilities and injuries, and everybody turned them down except for the University of Illinois. I had no idea about that, but I think one of the great things the staff at DRES, the Division of Disability Resources and Educational Services, does is that they educate the students. The history carries forward. And so the coaches who were working when I was an athlete have now moved on. But the new coaches learn that history and they continue to pass that on. And it instills a sense of pride that makes you want to talk about the University of Illinois and let everybody know what happened here. And I was talking earlier about how proud I was to wear USA on my uniform. I can tell you I was incredibly proud to wear Illinois on the front and the back of my jersey as well. I still have all of my racing jerseys, and I've been retired for over a decade. But as I said, I talk about the University of Illinois in every speech because they not only help students academically, but they invest in students' lives personally. And there are things that I learned about myself I never knew. You know, I had these coaches who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and they wouldn't let me stay where I was. They pulled me out of my comfort zone and created a leader that I never knew existed inside of me.
What do you want people to take away? What do you hope people will take away from your story? You're still vibrant, getting out there, getting the word out about U of I and your life story. What do you hope people will learn from that?
I have a children's book. It's called Dream Big, Work Hard. And I hope that people recognize that if you have a vision and a dream, and you're willing to put the hours and the time into it, you're willing to work hard and make the sacrifices that are necessary, things happen that you couldn't plan or control. And as I said earlier, I think perspective on let me start over.
That's fine.
Yeah. A perspective that a person has about themselves is very important. And as I said earlier, I see my disability as a characteristic like hair color or eye color. It's not a defining principle. When I was growing up, everybody was looking at my sister. She was dreaming about being the first female president of the United States, and everybody just knew she was going to do that. But nobody could help me dream. People thought, well, Jean will do something with her hands, but whatever you do, we know it'll be okay. But it wasn't that, wow, we see things for you. And then when I came to the University of Illinois and had the coaches and the academic faculty see things in me, it changed me. And I think one of my life goals is to pass on that encouragement and that motivation and that excitement to pursue things that you didn't think were possible. Another thing that we learned by being in the program at the University of Illinois was to invest in other people. And so our coaches were always hosting individuals in the form of sports camps, in the form of weekend workshops where they were training other people about upper body exercise. My coaches were not only coaching, but they were engaged in the research that was moving things forward. We were the most fit guinea pigs in the world. And that was part of the fun and pride of being associated with Illinois. And because I saw my coaches investing in people who weren't necessarily their athletes, it made you want to go out and help other people too. And so after I retired, I was invited to travel to Ghana, West Africa, to teach a wheelchair track camp to people there with physical disabilities. And just like that kid in high school, and just like the coach who was trying to recruit me to Illinois and the coach who wanted me to do the marathon, this organization who wanted me to go to Ghana had to be persistent because I said no at first. But after the third phone call, I said, okay, I'll go to Ghana and I'll teach this wheelchair track camp. I knew polio was still endemic, and I expected people to limp into the stadium. I knew that wheelchairs were not that common, but hoped that some of the athletes had benefited from organizations going in and doing wheelchair distributions. I figured people would be on crutches, but what I was not prepared for were the people who crawled into that stadium on their hands and knees. They were wearing sandals on their hands, and they had calluses on their knees like you have on the bottom of your feet. And I immediately thought back to when I was 15 and I got my first wheelchair. I was so angry about it. I thought God was mad at me and was picking on me, and you know, I could tell him everything that my brothers and sisters were doing, and you know, he needed to pick on them too. And yet I've never had the indignity of having to crawl on the ground. There was always a wheelchair when I needed one. And you start to realize I wasn't being picked on, I was picked out. And I was picked out to do special things. And being in Ghana, West Africa was one of those special things. We had donated equipment. We had 7 somewhat antiquated racing chairs, 6 of which were functional. And there were 32 people who came to that wheelchair track camp. They all had to share the equipment. For some of those people, for 10 minutes in the morning when we did our morning workouts, and for 10 minutes in the evening when we did our evening workouts, they were up off the ground. And that has become a life mission, both literally and figuratively, to help get people up off the ground. It was another life-changing experience, and I'm so grateful that Johnny and Friends, this nonprofit organization, was persistent in their invitation to have me go to Ghana, because it's made a difference in these people's lives. I went back in 2002. I didn't have to get talked into it. In 2003, I worked with a number of Rotary clubs here in the Champaign-Urbana, Savoy area, and we raised enough money. We got a matching funds grant from Rotary International. $60,000 brought 8 of those wheelchair athletes and 2 of their coaches here to the U.S. We got them their very own custom-made everyday wheelchairs, their very own custom-made racing chairs. For some of them, it's the first wheelchair they ever owned. They received them at a Rotary luncheon. One of them went and sat in the wheelchair, and as soon as he sat down, he said, "I'm so happy I could laugh." It just brought tears to your eyes because she thought, wow, this has really made a difference. Something that I did is making a difference. In 2004, it was an Olympic and Paralympic year. For the first time in history, Ghana sent 1 male and 1 female to the Paralympic Games. For the first time, Ghana had a flag in those opening ceremonies. Afterward, Johnny and Friends, this nonprofit organization, had a camera crew there. They interviewed the 2 athletes, Raphael and Ajara. And Ajara, the young lady, got polio when she was in 4th grade. And immediately She was taken out of school. It was deemed her life had no value. There are thousands of years of superstitions that still exist. People are believed to be cursed by God if they have a disability in that region. And so she was marginalized. She wasn't invited to family meetings. She wasn't invited to eat at the same table as her family. And so Johnny and Friends in their interview said, Ijara, you've been to America, and you are the first woman to represent Ghana in the Paralympic Games. How has your life changed? And she said, now my family talks to me. Now I'm invited to family meetings. And you're like, wow, that is life-changing for her. So these people who were seen as less than and devalued in their culture are now leaders, and they're now celebrated. All these years later, they're competing for Ghana. They went in 2008 and they're going back in 2012. All these years later, they have become leaders, as have some of the other individuals who were a part of those camps. And I think, you know, it all started because somebody saw something special in me. So it's a gift that you give to the next generation.
I was getting ready to ask you about that. It's terrific. What's next? You got the children's book out? What's next on your list? Things you want to do?
Right now, I'm serving as an assistant dean of advancement in the College of Applied Health Sciences. It's a new promotion. I'm in charge of all the fundraising and alumni relations activities in the College of Applied Health Sciences. The opportunity to serve the University of Illinois and this college is incredible. It's one of those things I never envisioned for myself, and so I feel really honored to be able to give back and create a greater place than when I came. So right now, that's where my focus is. In the future, I will always have a desire to serve and to make a difference and to invest in people's lives. It was modeled very well for me here at the university. And I don't know where life will take me, but I know it's going to continue to be exciting, and I'm anticipating those next experiences.
Jean, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack.
Oh, wonderful. Do we have a little time with you, Sil? I'd like